All right, folks, welcome to Garza Gaitan and the game where we go play by play in the game of politics. And what a week it has been. I'm here with Daniel Garza, who's representing, you can see him there. He's representing El Equipo de Monterrey because it is the World Cup of Clubs. I got a chance to see Boca Junior play Benfica. They tied 2-2. What we're not going to do in this podcast is talk about the Gold Cup, where Honduras played Canada a few days ago. We won't talk about that game. We won't get into the score. But yeah, Daniel, how do you see it? How you been?
Things are good, man. The game is heating up in the Club World Championship in FIFA. So I'm proud to represent my colors of, my favorite soccer team, club team, Los Rayados del Monterrey, that tied with Inter Milan 1-1. They take on now River Plate and see what happens. Hopefully, maybe they can move on to the next round. That'd be amazing.
Yeah, that was a big game for them. Inter Milan just came off of the Champions League game. They got second place, but still they made it very far. But look, we are going to talk a little bit more down the line about the World Cup of Clubs and what it means for the buying power, what it means for the audiences that they're targeting here in the United States. But also, we're going to be looking at, on this episode, the situation in Iran, the situation that is with Israel and Iran, what it means, what's the analysis there. And we're also going to look at the latest on immigration. The last 2 to 3 weeks kind of sparked again with the protest riots in Los Angeles. But President Trump in the last week has talked about the importance of tackling one specific issue on immigration. We're going to get into that onto the episode. But to start with Iran, look, this is the situation with Israel and Iran. This is not something new. This is something that for decades, Iran has been very clear on the fact that they view Israel as they take the same position as Hamas, that they believe that that territory is not of Israel's. They don't believe in the state of Israel. They have been very clear on their position in that space. In the last 7 to 10 days, Israel took proactive attacks to dismantle, to hurt their nuclear capabilities that they're trying to win. This all comes in the context of the U.S. calling for Iran to really take serious the negotiations in this space. Now, there's a lot of ways or a lot of things to analyze in this space, but Daniel, I just want to ask you very top line, how do you see it? What's your analysis of what's going on in the Middle East at the moment?
Well, you're right, Wadi, in the sense that Iran's stated policy position is the destruction of the state of Israel. And of course, that cannot be tolerated by the state of Israel. But also, further than that, I think destroying Iran's nuclear facilities will save millions of lives around the world, Wadi. And the fact is that Israel is within its rights to defend itself and secure its interests against Iran, a country that has consistently, again, acted aggressively against it, that has financed terrorist operations throughout the entire Middle East, acted as a proxy in support of Iran's, again, stated policies. Now, the United States can and should continue to assist, I think, by providing, of course, equipment and intercepting missiles, as they have been doing, and drone attacks that have been aimed at Israel for now going on 7 days at the recording of this podcast. But I think this is where the U.S. should draw the line. We, of course, are going to be a friend to Israel. We're going to support Israel. We're going to give them this kind of resources and assistance. But to mire the United States in yet another war in the Middle East, I don't think we have the patience for it, and we've grown very weary of those kind of efforts. So the fact is, though, that the Iran regime, let me be very careful, is an enemy of America. They have, for now half a century, yelled, death to America and death to Israel. Each one of their regime leaders have stepped up to the mic and rattled off, threatening language time and time again. All that has a consequence, and I think it's high time that these people were shut up. So Israel is taking care of that for us, and God bless them for it. It's also, like I said, has been a state sponsor of terrorism with the Houthis and the Hamas and Hezbollah. They've been very involved in that, and it's been a key player in the instability of what happens in the Middle East. Yeah, I, you can't think of the Middle East and not think of the chaos and not think of the insecurities, and they're the folks that are causing a lot of this. And so it's time that they stop killing Americans, stop trying to assassinate our president, interfered with the shipping lanes, and of course, plotted the destruction of Israel.
Yeah, Daniel, you actually talked of how they have aligned with Hamas, the Houthis, and Iran is the leader of the axis of resistance, which it's many of these combination of terrorist groups, tribes, leaders that have all come around their goals, and a key component of their goals, really by their terms and their words, is the destruction of the West, specifically the United States and that of Israel. So they have been clear on their terms. This is not something that they hide. When Israel attacks, they understand what they're doing. But I also agree with you that I think this is a point where I think, rightfully so, President Trump, Secretary of State Marco Rubio have been very detailed on their words, very careful with their words. I mean, President Trump has signaled very strongly, what his position is on calling that this is a moment for them to seriously come back and negotiate in the space of not or disarming their nuclear capabilities. And he's given warnings, but he's also, I think, in a good way, not been too accelerated to just jump into a war, not sort of react in a way that doesn't send a clear message, because I think the sort of the verbal warnings and the stating of the position is an important step. So I do think him and Marco Rubio have taken an approach that I think a lot of Americans, like you mentioned, there's a remembrance that we were in Afghanistan, I think just 5 years ago, or so, and the amount of time that of lives that were fought for and that died in Iraq and in Afghanistan. So I think there's really a desire for us for our president to push for negotiations in this space, and they have been doing that
Yeah,
very
but
much.
let me also be quick to say though, Wadi, too, is that um, I was there on 9/11 in Washington, D.C. when the attack occurred. I was living 3 blocks from the Pentagon, took the Pentagon Metro that morning before it got hit, and came back to the Pentagon after, the plane had crashed into it, and just stood there for about an hour with my mouth open, that how could this happen to us, right? And so for me, I'm old enough to have that memory indelibly, impressed on my mind,
Mhm.
and I will not soon forget it. Sometimes if you don't take care of business over there, it'll come to you, right? And so if we are drawn to the point where war is inescapable, where there is no other option, that it be strategic, that it be direct hits, that we take care of business right away, not get mired into an Iraq or an Afghanistan situation. So I'm not saying we will never be involved in a war with Iran. If we do, I think it has to be very effective, strike quick, get the hell out.
Yeah, very much so. All right, Daniel, another topic that we've been following from this week that has been developing is on the topic of immigration. At a press conference, Donald Trump talked and recognized the important role of many workers who do not have legal status in the United States, but they have been here for decades, for years, working in agriculture, in farming, in meat packing, in the hospitality industry. And he called and recognized the need for legislation in this space. Look, let's be honest, immigration is a topic where it gets very heated. It also very personal. And there's a lot of information, a lot of data, and people debate this topic back and forth. But I think in the area of ag, it's very fascinating because sometimes people say, well, they're taking American jobs from Americans. I think it's a little bit more complicated, more nuanced than that. I know that in agriculture, many of these jobs are seasonal. These are individuals who maybe were working, 3 to 4 months in California, then they move to possibly Washington State, to Nebraska, and the average American family is not going to want to spend 3 months in one state, move their kids and family to another state for 3 months, move their kids to another school, and take these. So it's not always like the laziness from Americans. It's in part these jobs require a complicated schedule. They're not easy to do, and the reality is these folks, these immigrants, do a job in this space, and there is a need. I want to come to you. And what is your opinion of what Donald Trump said? Is this good news for those looking for step and movement, not just through executive orders, but because his call was, I think, possibly executive orders, but there was also a call for legislation in this space. How do you see it?
Yeah, and these are essential workers. This is where we have to meet labor demand. Otherwise, the agricultural sector will crater. And if you think prices are high now, it would dramatically spike if you did, of course, have an system-wide or sector-wide absence of all of a sudden 2 million farm workers. Look, I've often thought that when they say they take jobs that Americans don't want, they're talking about farm working. I know that because I was a farm worker since the time I, was born in California, where my parents were picking the grapes, to the time I was raised in the state of Washington, mostly picking apples, pears, peaches, cherries, everything under the sun, and then having, like you said, migrated to Nebraska as well, following las corridas, right?
Mhm.
And during that entire time, Wadi, of my 15 years in the fields, because I worked until I was 19, I cannot recall seeing more than, I think, three Anglo Americans in the fields, or Native Americans, or anybody, or Black Americans working in the fields and the orchards. I never saw them. The fact is, it is estimated that 80% of farm workers of the 2 million are undocumented. They come to do backbreaking work under the elements. And in a way, I think we can do better to meet labor demand. We can provide legal channels for these folks. And I think this is a no-brainer that the president should, I think, follow up on, work with Congress to get legislation done right away. That would go a long way. And it'd be the first step, maybe, of also opening up legal channels, of folks who have earned legality, folks who
Mhm.
have proven themselves and have been verified to be here to help strengthen America, right? To be industrious, to, achieve the American dream in every which way, and keep those out who would exploit Americans, right? Who would cause harm to Americans. It would, of course, allow the Border Patrol and customs agents, to be better at their job and be more focused on that criminal element. So yeah, yeah, I would do anything in my power to do this. Also, I think on the political end, I think it benefits the president too, because Spanish language television and mainstream media have focused on the non-criminals that are getting caught up in the dragnets of these deportations.
Mhm.
And in a way, I think the administration is starting to lose the narrative a bit, and it's starting to change sentiment, in a lot of the voters. And so I think they have to contrarrestar, counter a lot of this by actually taking care of the most vulnerable, meeting labor demand, and protecting immigrant communities by taking out the criminal element.
You hit a lot of key points there, Daniel. One item is that it's the earned aspect. I mean, these folks
Yeah,
have many times talked about that they are willing to go through the process, get in the
right.
back of the line, pass the background checks, pass the English proficiency test. Register with the government, provide the documents that they've been paying taxes for years, show that they're embedded in their communities, in their churches, in their neighborhoods. These individuals have said, like, I'm willing to earn that opportunity, even outside of the work that they do, that is such valuable to our country and to our nation. They're willing to go through that process. They're not asking to cut in the front of the line. They're not asking for, uh, per se, special treatment outside of something that, again, is earned. And I think, and you're right, it's not just the value for the economy and the nation, but it's the political aspect of it. There are a lot of key races that are up in 2027, in 2026, not just on the Senate side, but in the House side, if President Trump wants to have and be able to give a platform for a lot of these, the races that are going to be tough are more of those swing state
Right.
places where the topic of immigration is very important. In order to either increase your majority, maintain, or increase your majority and not lose it, you're going to have to engage on this topic. And for the moment, it's been a focus on border security, interior enforcement, which is a campaign promise that he is keeping. But there again, folks are going to be looking to what's next on immigration. They understand that it's not just a two-tier topic on enforcement and border patrol. They understand that it goes beyond that. That there are key aspects on legal channels, tax, high-skilled worker, low-skilled workers, ag, all of the above is one of those conversations that we're going to continue to see because there's a lot of champions in Congress that want to get this done. There's a lot of conservatives who have put a lot of work into this area to make sure that it's a merit-based system because it's interesting. There's other countries like Canada, like Australia, that have a little bit more of a merit-based system where it isn't just based on family. They look at your English proficiency, they look at your schooling, they look at the skill sets you might have because it's not just people in tech, but we talked about agriculture. So these are all the components. So I think there's a real good conversation that the president can have with Congress, and I'm very much looking forward to them doing that. Daniel, you actually mentioned a little bit about the Spanish language media and the role they've played on the reporting around immigration. Look, when we look at the landscape of media in general, historically, there has been a left leaning bias for many of the media outlets. Historically, we can point to Spanish language media and say that as well, especially on the topic of immigration. But with the growing number of conservative Hispanic voters, of a Hispanic conservative constituency, which we've seen in this last election and the previous elections, I think we can notice that there has been a gap in Spanish language conservative media, in outlets, in platforms that talk about the issues in a way that's unbiased and that speaks to those narratives and those values that many people have. Why do you think conservatives have lagged in this space with Hispanics and Spanish speakers?
Yeah, Whitey, I'm glad you bring up this point. It's so true, right? For so long, Spanish language television has tilted dramatically left. It has a left of center perspective. And frankly, it also advocates for leftist policies and policy candidates, let's say, or I should say political candidates. So in the sense that Spanish language television has promoted, one side of the political spectrum, one side of the policy debate, and it has diminished or demonized the other side. And the other side's policy perspectives as well, right, have been diminished, right? So in enhancing one voice and diminishing another, Latinos have been ill-served, I think, these past 30 to 40 years, because we've received sort of half stories, half narratives, and even been manipulated to believe one side advocates for them and the other side is out to get them. And we know which side, right, which is the Democrat Party. The conversation, I think, has to expand. It's got to align with Latino sentiments and values, with millions of Latinos who feel very strongly center-right, conservative, Christian values, traditional values, that are not being represented on Spanish language television, or even the projection by mainstream media about Latinos. And I've had to fight with this all my life, growing up a Republican in the Republican Party, promoting Republican conservative ideas and policies. There's always been this sort of charged questions that come my way, while the other opponent, on the left, when we're having a debate on national television, gets the softball questions that he can hit out of the park. And then it's always like 3-1, that kind of thing. So, traditional media has to stop doing this. They can't. Because if they tried, they would be inauthentic. I've seen it, right? Where they quickly revert to what they truly feel, when they pretend to be bipartisan, they picked a side. And it's human nature to remain loyal to that side that you picked. And so I think it's high time that the conversation changed. I think it's the timing is right for center-right Spanish language news and analysis. And hopefully we can announce that we'll bring about change real soon.
Yeah, Daniel, I want to ask, what's the risk if that change doesn't come? I mean, with this growing constituency, there's also if we look at the numbers and we look at the data, there's also folks who maybe their loyalty isn't completely there to conservatives or the conservative values, but what happened is that they just got to the point where they were dissatisfied with what the left was offering, and not being heard, and almost having an agenda pushed on them. So they kind of came and said, we'll entertain conservatives. What happens? What's the risk there if conservatives don't lean into this space and they don't do it through these media platforms that you just talked about? What's the risk that you see there long term?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I've always believed, and it's true, that there are millions of Latinos who align with center-right policies and center-right policy champions. Um, if this continues, this kind of false narrative, or at least a misrepresented narrative, that all Latinos are wired left, then of course what happens is that the Democrat Party, all they have to do is just impose their will or their agenda on the Latino community without actually considering what our priorities are, which is what they've done. And the reason why so many Latinos have left the Democrat Party, because in imposing this woke agenda, these new cultural values, that are coming from the left, Latinos are rejecting them, and they're starting to look to the alternative, and which is a party that respects and honors or upholds at least their values, upholds their policy prescriptions for inflation or for high interest rates or for high housing costs, for more energy production at the domestic level, and that are starting to vote Republican, right? So, and what's happened is also that finally, those on the center right are starting to make gains because they're connecting with Latinos on the issues that are a priority to them. And of course, for the longest time, the center right stayed away from minority communities, and they paid a price for that. And now, because we're in the millions, you can't ignore the numbers anymore, right? And so they're forced to, of course, engaged Latinos, and I think they're doing it now better than the left is. The left right now they're on their heels, Wadi. They don't know how to react to this massive shift that you're seeing of Latinos. But again, I think media has to catch up to that, has to
Yeah.
see the light, and enough of picking a side and advocating only for one side, or of the political spectrum.
Yeah, and the market's there for it, Daniel. Not only in the sense that Hispanics again are growing in conservative circles, but our buying power is growing. That means that people are going to be looking to grab the attention of Latinos. What better in a space that aligns with their values of their own community of people? Again, if there's preferences of Spanish language and English language, so I do know there's an appetite for this. There's a market for it. So an important conversation that we're going to continue to have. Like you said, we're going to keep our eyes open for change and for new ideas and for new innovation in this space. So it's something that we'll continue to talk in this podcast as well. But folks, there you have it. Our episode for today with the focus of the situation between Iran and Israel, the immigration debate that continues out of Washington, D.C., and the importance of closing that gap between conservatives when it comes to media outlets, and of course, Monterrey versus Inter Milan, that tied game. Let's see
Go
how they do
Rayados.
against River Plate, Argentina, one of Argentina's favorites coming out for this World
All right.
Cup of Clubs. We'll see it. And Daniel, hope you have a good weekend, and hope your team continues
Sure.
to have a good showing in the clubs of the
I'll be
World
rooting
Cup.
for them.
Claro que sí. All right, thank you, everybody. Stay tuned.